Welcome to the Entrepreneur Gene. I'm your host, Laurie Barkman. Each week, we'll hear from founders and CEOs to explore key decisions they've made for growth, value creation, and challenges along the way. This show is sponsored by the Business Transition Sherpa, offering entrepreneur advisory services from transition to transaction. Don't forget to hit subscribe, follow us for the latest episodes, and visit thebusinesstransitionsherpa.com for more exclusive content. Let's dive in. Welcome back. This is another wonderful episode. I'm super excited for my guest today. We discovered that we worked at the same company, although not at the same time. So that's got to come up in this conversation. People are going to want to hear more about that. But let me tell you a little bit more about my guest. She's got over 20 years of experience leading teams, serving as chairman, CEO of multiple companies. She's a huge proponent of women in business, female leaders, and she works to encourage other female entrepreneurs. She has been involved with Women Impacting Public Policy International Organization for more than 10 years, and she is the founder and executive vice chair of the board of Interos AI. Welcome, Jennifer Bisceglie. I'm super thrilled you're here.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
So, this is a show where we talk to entrepreneurs about their journey. And we start with this question: is there an entrepreneur gene? And what does it mean to you?
Mhm. It's a great question. And whenever I see classes at colleges for entrepreneurship, I always wonder what they teach you. Not to say it's a bad idea. I think everybody should have the opportunity to run their own business. It's a great experience. It's a humbling experience. But I do believe it's a gene. I think there's something that is at least in me, that gets me up every day and allows me to keep fighting the good fight, because it is a fight every day. And there's always something different, even if it's a good day. And I'll share a quick story. My husband and I, when we first got together, went to visit like a wealth planner, really betting on the come. And they gave us a risk analysis test, if you will. And my husband is a retired Navy nuclear engineer and very risk averse. And, his risk tolerance was next to zero. And if there was a sub-zero, that was probably there. And for me, it was like, oh, it'll come back. Money grows on trees. There's just something inside, I think, entrepreneurs, that we're just wired a little bit differently. And the highs are never as high and the lows are never as low. But you're just excited every day to go, to get up and make a difference.
Risk tolerance comes up so often on this show. It's really interesting. And I've also had more people coming on saying, no, there isn't an entrepreneur gene. For a while, every answer was yes. And yet, this risk piece comes up. Do you think that that's innate? That there's something innate in the, like you're describing, your husband chose a profession that was quote unquote more risk averse, right? Than making choices about starting your own business?
I truly do. And again, if you go back to even think about colleges, you have the A students that, in my opinion, are very process focused, very rigor focused. There's a way to do that. And they become doctors, they get in the medical field, they become lawyers. I was a C student on a good day. And I went to a state school, a great state school. But, Harvard, the only time I ever made it there is I spoke there once. So, there's just a very, in my opinion, very big difference. I think we are just wired differently. It's what makes the world go round. But I don't know that, well, I do know. I personally do not have that discipline, that rigor to go into one of those fields. And I would argue that many of them probably could not, start something on their kitchen table, which is what I did with 4 people as 1099s and grew it to be a multi-million-dollar business 20 years later.
That's incredible. Another personality trait that you and I talked about off air was the ability to not have a boss, right? Or I don't know if that's a trait or just sort of becomes a preference. I can completely relate to that. And you and I have worked in, again, a similar big company, global company, right? And so if we're working in these big corporate jobs, and then we realize, wait a minute, I'm a good employee, but I could do better if I didn't have a boss. Did that weigh in on your view of the entrepreneur gene?
So, and thank you so very much for not telling everybody how long ago it was we were at that company. But, people ask, why did you start your own business? And I always say I did not work well for other people. It wasn't, I did not have, and I've talked to other entrepreneurs, much like you're sharing, that have said, I can make more money. I can do this better. I can do it differently. It wasn't that for me. I was almost cliche in that I had always had, I was part of the gig economy before it was had a name. I was like the fifth highest salesperson for Pampered Chef. If you remember Pampered Chef,
I
um,
do.
yeah, in the country, my second month. I ran a couple companies where I would move around a little bit for my day job, and I'd start like a cooking business. Not that I'm a big cook, but just for whatever the reason it spoke to me. So I always had something going on the side, and I think that was probably just to take care of some of the frenetic energy that an entrepreneur has. Um, it got to the point where personally I was not married. I had some money at the bank, but not, they tell you to have, 6 months of salary or whatever. I didn't have that, but I didn't have a lot of responsibility other than myself. And I saw a gap in the market and I understood the gap and what it would take to fill it. And I just went and did it. And I remember having a conversation with another woman entrepreneur at the time. And she said, why not now? And you can always go back and get a job. And so, like I said, it was a bit cliche how I did it. Just kind of took a leap of faith and the gap in the market, but knock on wood, it worked out.
Yeah, that's great. As we think about challenges, all of the business owners out there are facing challenges. Jennifer, which ones are keeping you up at night?
Mm. The ones that are outside of my control. So, and this is not a political statement, but this change of administration. 50% of Interos's business is US federal government. And there are so many rapid changes, and it always happens, right? And this administration is different than the last administration to the previous one. They're always there, the executive orders that are coming out. And we're just reading them and trying to absorb them and say, okay, how does this pertain to Interos' business? How can we continue to service and help our customers in a way that's healthy for them and healthy for our business? And yet there's so many changes that we certainly don't know everything that's coming. It's those types of things that keep me awake at night. The fires in LA that are going on, and they have employees out there, and it just breaks your heart when you're talking. I'm sorry, when you're talking to these people and they're moving their kids in the middle of the day for safety. Those types of things keep me awake at night. After doing this for 20 years, the day to day doesn't keep me awake anymore. It comes under the clone of the business. That doesn't keep me awake anymore. It's the stuff I can't control that keeps me awake.
I can really empathize with that. And it's going to make my follow up question so much harder because I like to ask people, well, given these challenges, what advice do you have? And maybe this is not the right question because we can't control these things.
Mhm.
So the follow-up question to all of that is, how do we deal with it? How do you parse it out so it doesn't consume you and then you just want to ball up in a corner and cry every day?
Yeah, one of the hardest things that I found for the first 10 years of being in business was, and I didn't do it well, to be honest with you, was to have something outside of the business. There's so many of us that become our company, and there's a lot of challenges with that. You can miss the market. When is it time to let it go, to sell, or to merge, or whatever the next step is, if it's not going to be a lifestyle company that you're going to keep forever. What's the best thing to build value for the employees? We gave options to every single one of our employees as they became part of the business. So when I think of, how do you handle some of these things, it's just to make sure that you have some sort of perspective. And I've gotten better with it the last, call it 5 years, but it took me a solid 10 to 15 years to do it, which sounds really a long time. But it's making sure that you have something outside so that you can balance yourself. When a few years ago, when Silicon Valley Bank had their trouble, we were 100% banked with them. And I remember it was a Thursday night. I was at an event for one of my friends. She was celebrating 25 years in business. And we started getting the Reuters report came out, and I started getting a bunch of phone calls from my board, and people were asking questions because nobody really knew what was going on. Friday morning, I remember waking up and walking outside, and it was like the birds stopped chirping. There was no wind, and
Wow.
and I think that again, the only thing that got me through was the relationships I had with my board, that were fighting the good fight to make sure that we can make payroll. but also being able to pick up the phone and talk to other people and just get some perspective. And I think that's really saved me through this.
Yeah, understandable. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. As we think about the future, the name of your company has a dot AI, which is kind of sexy and kind of scary at the same time for those of us who are trying to get our heads around what the future of AI can look like for our company, for our industry, for our country, for everyday living. I'll ask this question in the sense of your industry, which is supply chain risk. What excites you about the future of your industry?
Just the intelligence aspect of it. I was listening to a podcast this morning coming back from working out, and they were talking about, um, the shortcoming of AI is it's only as good as whoever trained it. And so that's really something in the hallucination that, we're all worried about. And we spend a lot of time internal to Interos. I have some really smart PhDs working on our methodology and our artificial intelligence to make sure we don't have drifting and bias and all those types of things. But what has me excited is what can happen. It allows us to go faster if it's used safely and well. It allows us to learn from the past in ways that we couldn't do before because we were reliant on either the papers that were around us or what we remember. And now you really have the ability. I mean, think about an encyclopedias, for those of us that remember encyclopedias, everything went to Google. It's that on steroids. The ability to make better informed decisions faster has me incredibly excited. And in supply chain, we're already seeing this. I mean, you're seeing the big procurement systems. They've already started trying to figure out, and they're not known for innovation, right? But they're buying it. And so they're trying to figure out how to bring our different types of machine learning or data science, artificial intelligence into their platform. We have been that since the beginning. And so our platform, I started the company in 2005, so it'll be 20 years old here in just 2 weeks. I keep telling people the company got older and I didn't. But the first technology platform we put out in 2014, and we've been using various types of artificial intelligence from the beginning.
You're a pioneer in that area, and you don't fear the future. You're part of the future, which is so exciting. And gosh, I mean, we could probably spend a whole episode just talking about that. Not for answering necessarily right now, or if you have a little bit of an answer, this would be cool. Given some of the things you mentioned and the change of the administration, one of those things could be tariffs that might impact our supply chains. Are there ways that the model can anticipate some of the changes in pricing, delivery, and,
Yeah.
and so on?
It's one of the top 3 use cases for artificial intelligence and supply chain is modeling. Everyone has wanted to know, give me a foreshadowing so that I can preempt or mitigate disruption. And so think about when SolarWinds, the cyber breach that came through, we were supporting one of our biggest contracts till today is with the US Navy. And we were able to help them understand which of their major weapons programs were being impacted by SolarWinds in a way that previous to using our platform, they would have had to deploy people to make phone calls to understand what was being impacted. And so kind of fast forward, the vision of Interos was always to move from mapping and monitoring global supply chains to getting to predictive and prescriptive intelligence. And so that's really what you're talking to me about now is how do we use artificial intelligence to be able to make better informed decisions faster based on either foreshadowing, slash predictions, and then tell me what to do about it from prescriptions. And so when you think about, tariffs, we don't know everything that's going to happen. And to be honest with you, the one that has me more concerned and most business owners is the reciprocal actions that are happening. So you saw when we started announcing tariffs with China, trying to put out their own list. And you're going to see that. And that's just how business is done. That's not a surprise. And it's not the first time ever. And it won't be the last time. But now businesses leveraging technology like Interos we're able to plug some of those facts in and foreshadow where should I place my bets. Last example I'll give you is when Russia invaded Ukraine, there were 3,000 sanctions levied against Russia in a matter of 2 weeks. 3,000. And a lot of them were unhooking the supply chain from Russia. And I happened to be right outside of London when the invasion happened a few years ago. And we were meeting with a company and it was lovely. They kept the meeting, a 90-minute meeting with us, but the executives kept walking out of the room because they were taking phone calls because they were trying to buy as much titanium from Russia as they could before it got shut down. And you just think of the ripple effect of what happens. And so customers were using our platform not only to be able to answer their boards, did they have to reroute their supply chain, but if they figured out an alternative source of supply in India, in Vietnam, in South America, and if they rerouted their supply chain, did they still back up into Russia? And so when you think about the tariffs, like I said, it's not just the transparency, which is needed by every single company today, but it's also the reciprocal arrangements that are happening that we want to get ahead of. We want to model, to your question, and figure out what do we do if, so that it becomes cheaper, it becomes better informed, and it's better business for our companies, our boards, and our customers.
If you love the insights on this show, you'll love the insights I share in my book, written for entrepreneurs like you who are building with your exit in mind. Take the next step in your business journey to make your business more scalable and valuable. Head on over to btsherpa.com/book to grab your free digital copy of the Business Transition Handbook. Or you can also click the link in the show notes, btsherpa.com/book. Jennifer, I have learned a ton from you, and this has only been a very, very short conversation, but you're so good at sharing your knowledge. I appreciate that. I want to switch gears a little bit and ask more about you and your origin story. Tell us some of the key moments of your growing up and what helped shape you, some of the aspects of your career choices and starting your fantastic business.
I don't know. When people ask, do you remember when you were 5? I'm like, I don't think I was ever 5. So, I grew up in New Jersey and South Jersey. I tell people the good part of New Jersey. It was a great place to grow up. I've heard today on a podcast, not that I spent a lot of time listening to podcasts, but that parents are not allowing their kids to play outside till they're 12 because we're afraid of what's happening. And I'm sitting there, I remember, I don't know about you, but my parents shoved me out the door as soon as they could and said, come back when the lights are on. And then my father, had his own insurance brokerage, so he was an entrepreneur, and so I saw what it was like to really throw everything behind it. Um, and like I said, it kind of when I started the business, it was a bit cliche, or it was a gap in the market. I was tired of working for other people, and I literally hired 4 people. They sat at my kitchen table and we did an inventory audit. And that was the start of the company. And it just grew and grew and grew. Interestingly enough, though, the idea that I had, which was the visibility of the global supply chain, um, it was right now I'm dating myself. It was back in the 90s. And it was right when the US started offshoring manufacturing, and kind of every country did, because we wanted to think about the Amazon model. We want to get closer to our customer, closer to the resources. And that was really what informed the gap. And from there, like I said, 4 people at a kitchen table and the place took off.
I think we need to reveal the Pittsburgh connection that we never knew we had. This podcast has brought us together. It's 2 degrees of separation, like fact-based here. Just share the fun facts. I think the audience will get a kick out of it.
So when we first spoke a couple weeks ago, I mentioned that I had been in Pittsburgh from 96 to 2000. And we started trading, where were we when? And I mentioned that in my free time, might have spent a little time at the bar Froggy's. And that was used in a very popular television show. And we both happened to work at American Eagle Outfitters, which at different times, but very, very small world.
Very small world. That was such a fun discovery. I love to get people to have an introspection, right? This conversation, we're talking about a lot of different things, but sometimes it benefits the guest. You even sort of say, wait a minute, let me pause and think about this. So this is one of those questions. If you could go back in time, Jennifer, to give yourself some entrepreneurial advice, what would it be and at what point?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I'm sure everybody has their own thought on this one. I would tell you that probably in year 2 of being in business, so not the first year. The first year I went out like gangbusters, and I thought I had to prove to the world I could do this and not fail. And maybe it was year 3, 2 or 3, when I finally asked somebody for help. And honestly, it was one of the first big jumps the company ever had. And so, there's the imposter syndrome that you hear about a lot. I personally think women were very hard on ourselves. I watch it repeatedly. I work with some other women business owners, newer, that just took an investment and just kind of take it down a few notches. It's really hard out there. Other people will beat you up. You don't have to do it to yourself. But I think from an introspective perspective, that's the right way to say that. I think if I had realized it's okay not to know everything out of the gate, it would have been a little bit more fun, and it may have been even easier. I will never know, but I think that's again, maybe a little cliche, but that would have been something that I wish I had done a bit differently. It was a lot of pressure for no reason at all.
It's a really important recognition. Why beat ourselves up for no reason? I find for my self descriptions, I would always say I'm a fairly impatient person. And I'm like, why am I doing that to myself? As now as an entrepreneur, I actually ironically am more patient than when I was in corporate America.
Yeah.
And it's you would expect me to probably say it differently, but I realize, you know what? This is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and it's okay. And I also really appreciate your comment about imposter syndrome. There are studies on this that, yeah, it probably befuddles more women CEOs than male CEOs. When I was a female CEO, first time CEO, I'll admit, yeah, I definitely had it. And then I realized, you know what? Wait a minute. The biggest jobs in the world, like president of the United States, well, they're not in that seat before they're in the seat,
Right.
right? And so if they can step in and whoever they are, right, at all points in our history and do it, then why can't I do this? And so I kind of got over it. I kind of forced myself out of it. But it's a really important point, right? To not just be so hard on ourselves.
Well, it is, and even in the example that you just shared, think about what their support network looks like. They have teams of people, and so why should a single female or not female CEO know all the answers when the people like you're just talking about, they have teams of people to help them get there?
Oh, yeah, 100%, 100%. One of the things you mentioned earlier, Jennifer, I'm gonna kinda pull on the thread a little bit, is purpose. You mentioned purpose, identity. I thought what you said was spot on, which is if we don't create an identity outside the business, it's very difficult to envision a transition away from it. And for some, it leads to a variety of calamities, right? If we time the market wrong, we sell, but we regret. We don't sell, we regret. All those variations of expressing regret in life. And for some, they sell and then they regret because we really don't have any other thing else in their life, and so they're depressed. I mean, it just is a litany of sad stories. So this purpose question, I love to talk about on this show, particularly because you're in the trenches. You're still building. I mean, I know you're serving on the board. You're probably not as day to day as you have been in the past, but nonetheless, you've created a mindset for yourself that it's important to have this identity outside the business. So tell me a little bit more about that. What's your purpose inside the business now, and what is your purpose outside as you see it?
Yeah, I've never considered Interos to be my baby. I love my team. I have done what I think is my best to take care of the team and our customers because we wouldn't be here without our customers. But I've never thought about it as a baby. It's always been a business engine to make a difference. I think that benefited me for exactly what you're talking about because it's not as much of an emotional tie. I mean, trust me, I'm full invested. Did the 24/7. But we brought in a CEO in April of last year to really scale, and it's been exciting for me. It was the right decision. The board was very supportive of it, which I appreciated. And and as you can imagine, the company's going through changes, and it needed to because we really wanted to focus on scale and value creation. And so, within the company right now, I still focus on a major business unit. I spend a lot of time with our federal customers. It's a different, a lot of commercial companies don't have a federal arm. It's different contracting, different procurements. And I've right or wrong, I've known how to do it for 27 years. So I'm spending a lot of time there and then, evangelizing and getting out in front of the market, as you can imagine. Outside the business, though, I spend a lot of time giving back and with other people that are trying to do what I've done. And, I started even before, excuse me, even before I started Interos, probably within a year of starting the company. I was living where was I living? I think I was in New Jersey at the time. I had gone back home. So my father had passed away and I'd gone back home to help my mom out. And I was getting ready to move to Washington, D.C. And I was looking to get involved in some sort of small business advocacy. I didn't know why, because I didn't come from it, but I did. And so I was Googling and I found women impacting public policy. And I remember calling them and saying, I will join at the highest level, the most active level, but you have to help me because I can't use advocacy and public policy in a sentence. And they did. And it's been amazing. I was the first chairman of their board. To your point, I started their international arm, had the opportunity to travel to many places around the world representing women business entrepreneurs. And, it's one of those things we read often that a lot of people, especially women, because we take care of households, we raise children, what have you, as the main conduit, we don't start giving back to her in our 50s. And I started back, again, dating myself in my early 30s. And so that kept me whole because it gave me something outside, but it's also giving me a focus as we continue down this route.
In your spare time, which I'm sure you have very little of, what's something that you wish you had more time to do?
Oh, read. I read trash books that if you ask me, I won't admit to it, because I only read like when I wake up in the middle of the night. And I don't know, I'm not pushing a product here, but for whatever the reason, when I use my Kindle, it puts me right back to sleep. It's some sort of self-soothing light. But I read trash books, and it's just something that everybody's like, "Oh, what business book do you read?" I'm like, "Nope, I can get that at the office." So I wish I had more time to read. I actually took I guess most papers do this. The Washington Post printed their top 50 from 2024. So I committed to my neighbors that we're going to read all 50 books this year. So that's one thing. I think that we're getting better with travel. Now, it's been a few years since the world kind of opened up. And my husband's a very strong cyclist. And on our honeymoon, we went to Italy and we had 2 bikes. And he kept riding back and doing this thing because I was still trying to figure out how not to brake and flip over the handlebar. So I made him get a tandem, and everybody laughs at us, but it travels. And we've done Puglia, we've done France, we've done Puglia in Italy, we've done France, we've done Portugal, and so traveling a little bit more. So traveling and reading, that'd probably be what I'd do.
I love that so much. I love the idea of him doing most of the work on that bike, and you're
I
like,
love
"We're"
that. It's the only way because we'd be in Italy and I'd be like trying not to flip on my bike. And he's like, "Oh, look at that. Look at that." I'm like, "I can't look at anything. I'm looking at the road." Now I
Yeah,
can see everything.
that's no joke. A friend of mine went on a bike trip, like one of those organized bike trips in Spain or something, and she came back with a broken arm. So yeah, it can
Totally. Not anymore.
not anymore. And by the way, because you mentioned that you like to listen to podcasts, have you tried audiobooks?
So I'm just starting. So maybe you have a recommendation. I hear it's really whoever like the reader is, whoever's reading to you makes a difference. When you talk about being impatient earlier, I have it on like 1 point something, so it speaks faster to me. I'm trying, but I don't know about you, but if I start, my mind goes someplace else and then I have to rewind again constantly. So I've not quite mastered it. Although I did just, and everybody else probably knows this, I did just find this thing on Amazon that you can buy the book and the audio, and then they catch up to each other. Do you know
Oh,
this?
no, that's cool.
I think it's called Whisper. And so you
Oh,
can buy them both. So if I'm in the car, I listen to it on audiobooks. And then if I decide to read it at night, it automatically finds where I left off in the car. It's a miracle. There you go.
wow. I love that. There you go. I'm gonna have to try that. That's amazing. It's amazing. Jennifer, this has been so much fun. And I know people listening are probably like, oh my God, she's so badass. I want to get in touch with her. How do I follow her? What are your social medias and how do people find you?
Yeah, well, LinkedIn is probably the easiest. And I think you have my name on the screen, but I'm very, very responsive to LinkedIn. So that's probably the best way to do it.
Okay, great. And we'll also have those links in the show notes for everybody. Oh, Jennifer, this has been so much fun, and I'm so happy that two Pittsburghers have come together 20 years later, right? I'm being generous on the 20 years, by the way.
And I'm from New Jersey. I just happened to make a pit stop in Pittsburgh.
Exactly, and I'm originally from upstate New York, so it's all good. At some point, we all become Pittsburghers. But hey, again, thank you so much, and I know that now we're part of each other's community. We're going to stay in touch. So, it's been a pleasure, and again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
And to our listeners, thank you so much. And if you've enjoyed this show, why not leave a rating and review, tell your friends about it, and check us out on our YouTube channel, Business Transition Sherpa, for all the videos for Entrepreneur Gene, as well as our sister podcast, Succession Stories. This has been another great episode of The Entrepreneur Gene, and we'll see you next time. Hey, that's a wrap. This show is sponsored by the Business Transition Sherpa, working with entrepreneurs who want to escape feeling like a prisoner in their own business and to eventually let go flawlessly. If you loved today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And if you want to help support the Entrepreneur Gene, I'd encourage you to leave a rating and review. Ratings and reviews truly help our show grow and get in front of more entrepreneurs just like you. If you do leave a rating and review, we'll be so happy. Take a screenshot of it, send it to my email, Laurie@btsherpa.com, and we'll send you a free digital copy of my book, The Business Transition Handbook. And we'll also enter you to win one of our monthly swag boxes. For show notes, including links to everything in today's episode, be sure to visit btsherpa.com. Also, as a reminder, you can watch this full video interview on our YouTube channel for the Business Transition Sherpa. While you're there, be sure to check out videos from our award-winning podcast called Succession Stories. We'll see you next time on The Entrepreneur Gene.